It was my privilege 26 years ago to award you your bachelor's degree and 25 years ago your master's degree. It was soon recognized that your first-rate performance as a teacher was matched by first-rate talent as an administrator, and you were quickly co-opted from one administrative job after another. In fact, you hardly had the opportunity to warm the chair in one post before you were drafted for another.
It's very nice to have so many people from so many institutions and so many old friends who have come back today to participate in this celebration.
I got to know Paul Gray when I was beginning graduate school.
But we really became close when I became his provost.
I first met him through his deep involvement in undergraduate education at MIT.
He was a great friend, a great colleague, but also a very great teacher for me.
I got involved as an athlete, as a swimmer, as a rower, as a sailor, and I would often see him and I would invite him to our competitions. And he would come. And I remember he and Priscilla coming into a swimming meet and just sitting down and staying for the whole time.
He was a quietly very brave, tenacious man, loving and kind and gentle and very focused and always very engaged.
He loved being around experts and taking advice from experts and learning from experts and sharing with experts.
He was the father who took us hiking, biking, swimming, sailing, skating. He's the one who ran behind us when we were learning to ride our bikes until we could do it on our own. There were no training wheels. We just figured it out.
Paul began his MIT life as a freshman.
Paul came to MIT in 1950, so that's almost 70 years. That's just simply remarkable. I cannot think of anybody else who gave so much of his life, who shared so much of his life with this institute.
He's a very down-to-earth individual, very straightforward man, but very caring.
He did so much for MIT, and he did it loyally. He did it morning, noon, and night.
He was so devoted to this place and to the students in such a genuine way. He was never in it for himself. He was always in it for MIT.
Some years ago, in a commencement in the rain, a father was heard to say, "After the soaking I've taken for the last 4 years, who minds a little rain?" But I have to say, this is something else. In the competitive sport of diving, the various dives are ranked according to the degree of difficulty. When the performances of different divers are equal, the diver who chooses the dive with the highest degree of difficulty wins. Now, by that measure alone, you here today are winners. You have chosen and successfully negotiated a collegiate education having what may be the nation's highest degree of difficulty.
You know, we always called it this special place. And I think for him, it really was a special place and a kind of home unlike he'd ever had before, because it satisfied him intellectually and it satisfied him, I think, emotionally. And when he was able to connect his own family to it, then I think that that was sort of a full circle.
MIT is best known for the scientists and engineers who have studied there.
He was at MIT at a time when engineering changed completely from a largely empirical practice of making things and making them work to a situation where science and understanding fundamentals affected the design and the implementation of so many systems.
This very gentle, quiet, fierce man, I know had to do battle to get Whitehead Institute established. People were terribly suspicious. And, frankly, he wasn't sure what it would be. Nobody was. It was an experiment, and he took the risk.
MIT and the biomedical enterprise in Kendall Square is unrivaled anywhere in the world. And so I do credit Paul with setting us out in that direction. So the Whitehead, we now have the Broad and the Reagan, the Koch Institute, any number of expressions of the power of biology to transform our world.
When I came to MIT, which was in 1965, I think maybe 2 or 3% of the students were women, fewer than that on the faculty. It was very much a male institution.
He was tremendously committed to diversity, increasing the representation in the faculty and in the student body of women and of minorities.
The number of entering African American students at MIT went from about 3 to 5 per year to 57.
To this day, I mean, we're just very proud of that momentum that Paul brought to the table on this issue.
MIT has a responsibility to itself and to the nation to be open and indeed to reach out to the most talented and promising people, regardless of race or sex.
None of us created all the bias around us, but we certainly inherit it. And what I love about President Gray is that he stepped right into that. And as soon as he saw it and understood it, he decided to actually do something about it.
During his inauguration, what he wanted as the walking in music was Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man. And that was him,
He always was in touch with his very modest beginnings in a blue-collar family where, the economy was a challenge. One of his fraternity brothers, while he was at MIT as a sophomore, was dating a woman at Wheaton College, where my mother was a freshman. They introduced my parents on what turned out to be a rather successful blind date.
It was very cold, and they're walking across the bridge, and my mother doesn't have any gloves. And my father said, I've got a pair of gloves. Why don't we do this? I'll wear the left one, you wear the right one, and we'll hold hands to keep the middle ones warm. And they walked across the bridge, and they walked off into the future. That was the first day of their relationship. I thought, well, that's pretty good for a nerd from New Jersey. A very clever use of a pair of gloves to win the girl's heart.
It was the big blizzard of '78, and no cars were allowed on the road, for a week, but MIT was not going to shut down. So we started this bus line, and one of my favorite pictures of Paul Gray is with his big wolfskin or beaverskin hat, like a Russian hat, out in the parking lot at MIT where the buses came in, directing traffic. I mean, he was very much hands-on.
He looks incredibly happy, actually, in the picture. He was just doing what he could do, I think, and having fun doing it. I think he had a lot of joy in what he did.
He was a real proponent of the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program, UROP.
It was dramatically successful and found a way for undergraduates to interact with the faculty in their research project.
This would be a way in which students could, for the first time perhaps in their years at MIT, come to terms with an unsolved real problem, something where they could make a genuine contribution.
That became an integral part of how MIT educates students, so it was a huge thing for us.
When he finished up all the administrative and leadership roles that he had at MIT, he went back to the classroom. He loved being in the classroom.
You turn the crank on a 3x3 matrix and solve for the node voltages E sub B, E sub C, and E sub D.
He was an absolutely excellent teacher. Clarity, complete concern with the students' understanding, very much enjoyed being in their company.
Professor Gray was my academic advisor when I was an undergrad here at MIT, and I remember he was a really warm, very friendly, giving advisor. At first, maybe you would think it might be a little intimidating having your advisor be the ex-president of MIT, but that turned out not to be the case at all. Professor Gray was extremely down-to-earth.
He really understood technological education and what a technological research university is really about and how precious it is.
One of the many involvements that the Grays had with students were the senior dinners.
We invited the whole class to dinner, 60 or 70 at a time.
All of us at MIT, we just celebrate the opportunities to be with those students. They are so special.
Every semester on registration day, we would meet with him, and then that evening, all of his advisees would go out to dinner with him, always at the Royal East.
If you can imagine, there was sort of a big table, usually in the back of the restaurant, all filled with, I'd say maybe about 10 or so advisees.
Yours is the obligation to help heal this society where healing is required, to help strengthen the nations where strengthening is required, and to help bring harmony among the nations of this world wherever discord obtains.
If you have ever seen Paul's official presidential portrait, it is a portrait of Paul and Priscilla.
He was the first person to have his spouse in the picture, right? And I think that for him, that was a measure of his devotion for her, his appreciation for all the things that my mother may have sacrificed in order to help him have the roles and the opportunities that he had, and all the ways in which she supported him. I think that that was his way of saying, you know, I wouldn't have been able to do this without Priscilla.
It was extraordinary to watch them together, how they worked together, how they supported each other. They both had a twinkle in their eye that would kind of ping at you.
Just to know that there was someone sort of watching over us, making sure that things generally are probably going to be okay for us. So I really appreciated that very much.
He is a man of exceptional integrity.
The humanness of the man and of Priscilla was so essential to the kind of leadership he provided at MIT. He cared about people.
A person with tremendous integrity, a person with tremendous wisdom, thoughtful, calm.
An extraordinarily forceful person, but also with a surprisingly gentle personality.
He was good at listening. He was good at negotiating and meeting people part way. And he was good at imagining what might be possible if this shifted or that changed or we could move forward together in this direction.
As you undertake this next stage in your lives, I wish for you a life that is rich in opportunities to stretch your talents, your interests, your imagination, and your vision of this small planet as a beautiful oasis generating peace. And as you depart from this special place, I wish you Godspeed.